They call it downsizing, but for most seniors, it feels more like disappearing. Every object holds a heartbeat, a photograph that still smells faintly of decades past, a teacup once shared with someone who isn't here anymore, a chair that remembers your laughter. Slowly, what began as a home turns into a time capsule, a place frozen between who you were and who you still want to be. But here's the truth no one talks about. Your clutter isn't a mess, it's a map. Each item tells a story about love, purpose, and belonging. And when you learn how to read that map, not erase it, you discover a new kind of freedom. What if your home could still cradle your memories, yet finally give you room to breathe? Today, we're not decluttering to empty your space, we're redesigning it to reflect your heart. Stay tuned, because makeover number 6 is what psychologists are now calling the warm cure for loneliness, and it's quietly transforming how seniors across America reconnect with life. Meet Marina, 72 years old, a retired librarian with eyes that still glimmer whenever she runs her fingers across the spine of an old book. Her small cottage on the edge of Vermont once smelled of fresh bread and cedar shelves, but over the years, it began to feel more like a museum than a home. Every corner whispered a story she couldn't let go of, stacks of novels she swore she'd reread someday, postcards from students who grew up and moved away, seashells from a honeymoon long past. Even her husband's coat still hung neatly by the door, as though he might return for one last walk around the lake. Marina wasn't messy, she was attached. Every item she owned was a chapter of her life, and deep down, she feared that letting go meant losing part of herself. But something began to shift one cold February morning. She was sipping tea, scrolling through a senior wellness forum, when she stumbled upon a phrase she had never heard before, the Cozy Renewal movement. It wasn't about stark white rooms or empty counters. It was about warmth, personality, and peaceful living. It spoke directly to people like her, older adults who didn't want to erase their history, but rather to curate it. The more she read, the more her heart softened. Cozy Renewal wasn't minimalism in the modern sense, it was emotional restoration. It was about keeping what made her heart hum and gracefully releasing what weighed her spirit down. That night, she didn't start with a garbage bag or a donation box. She began with a notebook. She wrote 3 questions at the top of the page: what still comforts me? What still serves me? What still reflects me? Slowly, answers began to form. The books she loved most stayed, the rest found new homes at the local library. The heavy curtains were replaced with soft linen that invited in the sunrise. For the first time in years, she could see her husband's coat and smile without pain. That was the moment Marina's transformation began. Not with decluttering, but with rediscovery. Cozy Home Makeover 1, the story space. Marina didn't begin her transformation with a checklist or a donation box. She began with stillness, and a single, quiet corner of her living room. That corner had once been invisible beneath stacks of magazines, travel souvenirs, framed photos, and her late husband's coats. It wasn't clutter to her, it was the geography of her life, layered with meaning. But what she hadn't realized was that by holding on to everything, she was slowly losing the ability to see what mattered most. The objects meant love, but they had started to swallow the light. Then one evening, while reading about a growing movement among older adults called Cozy Renewal, a trend that blends nostalgia with intentional comfort, something clicked. It wasn't about minimalism or getting rid of things. It was about giving memories space to breathe. That night, she cleared one small area near her reading chair and began a new ritual, what she would later call her story space. The idea was simple: choose only 5 items that hold meaning, display them intentionally, and change them each month. No purging, no guilt, no sterile minimalism, just a rotation of sentiment and story. The rest could wait in drawers or boxes, but this shelf would be sacred, a small stage for memory to perform rather than gather dust. Her first selection was tender and deliberate. A brass compass her husband once carried on their road trips through the Southwest. A creased ticket stub from their first movie together. A smooth white shell from the Oregon coast. Her first library card, soft at the edges from years of use. And a small note from her mother that read, "Keep reading, and you'll never be alone." That one corner transformed the mood of her entire home. It became a living memory, glowing beneath the soft light of a lamp. Every time she walked past it, she felt her breath slow. Instead of the heavy ache of nostalgia, she felt connection, a gentle continuity that whispered, "You've lived a full story, and it's still unfolding." As weeks passed, her story space evolved into a ritual of renewal. Each month, she'd pour a cup of tea, play her favorite instrumental records, and choose 5 new objects. Sometimes they followed a theme: journeys, beginnings, homecomings. Sometimes they were spontaneous, mementos that surfaced unexpectedly and felt right for the moment. With each rotation, she found that her memories softened, becoming sources of strength rather than sorrow. Neighbors began to notice. When they visited, they'd stop at that corner, drawn not by decoration but by meaning. "Tell me about this shell," one asked. And Marina smiled, because that question had become her new invitation to connection. What began as decluttering became something far more profound: emotional curation. Psychologists now say that such mindful displays can help older adults reduce anxiety, combat loneliness, and restore a sense of authorship over their own lives. Marina's story space was proof. It wasn't about letting go of the past. It was about reclaiming it, giving it shape, light, and rhythm. If you stood in her home today, you wouldn't see clutter. You'd see warmth, intention, and stories that still breathe. And perhaps, if you stayed long enough, you'd start thinking about your own 5 keepsakes, the ones that could tell your story too. Cozy Home Makeover 2, the Sun Therapy Room. Marina's next breakthrough didn't come from a magazine or a cleaning checklist, it came from light itself. She had read an article shared in her local senior center newsletter about something called circadian alignment, a growing trend among older adults focused on syncing daily life with natural sunlight. Researchers were finding that exposure to morning light, even just 20 minutes a day, could help regulate mood, reduce anxiety, and improve sleep cycles in seniors. It wasn't just decor, it was biology meeting comfort. That idea lingered in Marina's mind one chilly morning as she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by shadows. The blinds were half closed, her favorite armchair faced the TV instead of the windows, and she realized how little sunlight actually touched her home. Most of her days were spent under dim lamps, moving between cluttered corners that felt more like storage than sanctuary. The clutter wasn't only physical, it was emotional fog. So, she made a small but radical decision: she would rearrange her furniture around the light. With quiet determination, she pushed her sofa toward the window, rotated her reading chair to face east, and opened every curtain she owned. It wasn't perfect, boxes still lined the edges of the room, but for the first time in years, the morning sun poured across her living space like a warm invitation. The air even felt different. Within a week, she noticed changes she hadn't expected. Her mornings began earlier, not forced but naturally, as the light filled her room. She started to read again, not out of obligation, but because the light made her favorite novels feel alive. Her houseplants revived, her appetite improved, and she felt a quiet optimism creeping back. She hadn't decluttered yet, but she wanted to. The sunlight had restored something far more essential: her energy. Scientists at the University of Colorado and Stanford have recently emphasized how vital light exposure is for seniors, especially those who spend more time indoors. Proper light alignment helps balance serotonin and melatonin, reducing restlessness and fatigue. But what struck Marina most wasn't the science, it was the serenity. Her sun therapy room, as she now called it, became her safe haven. Every morning, she'd sit with a cup of tea, eyes closed, letting the light trace warmth across her face. It became her daily dose of peace before the noise of the world returned. Friends who visited noticed the shift. "There's something different about this room," one said. "It feels alive." Marina smiled because that's exactly how she felt, alive again, reconnected with the simple rhythm of day and night, light and rest. The clutter no longer defined the room. The light did. That single change, moving a chair, turning a sofa, opening the blinds, had done something profound. It gave her home flow. It reminded her that decluttering isn't always about removing, sometimes it's about redirecting. The same room, the same walls, yet completely transformed through sunlight and intention. Wherever you live, light is free, and it's medicine. The question is whether you've made space to receive it. Where does the morning sun touch your home first? Try sitting there for 1 week, even just 15 minutes a day. You might find, like Marina did, that once the light returns, the energy to face the rest of your life follows close behind. Cozy Home Makeover 3, The Comfort Capsule. There was a time when Marina's comfort came from collecting shelves of books, stacks of blankets, mugs from every vacation, and enough pillows to fill a guest house. But one evening, as she sat surrounded by all those things, she realized something unsettling. The more comfort she collected, the less comfort she actually felt. Every item once chosen with joy now demanded space, dusting, or storage. The weight of too much had turned her home from a sanctuary into a maze. That's when she came across the idea of microminimalism, a trend quietly spreading among seniors who were tired of extremes. It wasn't about stark white walls or throwing away everything. It was about concentrating comfort, identifying what truly soothes you and letting that be enough. Inspired, Marina decided to craft what she called her comfort capsule. The idea was simple but deeply intentional. Create one corner devoted entirely to calm. Not decoration, not distraction, comfort. She started with one chair, not the overstuffed recliner that had become her catch-all for unfolded laundry, but a simple wooden chair she reupholstered in soft blue fabric. She placed it near her sunlit window, the same one that now framed her mornings, and added only what mattered: one cozy throw blanket, one mug she loved, one small side table, and her journal. That was it. At first, the space looked almost too bare, but when she sat down, something shifted. For the first time in years, there was nothing demanding her attention. No clutter in her sightline, no piles whispering of unfinished chores. Just softness, light, and a sense of permission to pause. She called it her 5 o'clock chair, the spot where she'd sit every evening with tea and gratitude. Over time, this small practice reshaped her days. Whenever she felt anxious or overwhelmed, she would retreat to that corner. The act of physically entering her comfort capsule signaled to her mind that it was time to rest. No screens, no noise, no multitasking. Just presence. And in that stillness, she noticed something unexpected: clarity. Psychologists now affirm that such comfort zones can help reduce cognitive overload, especially in older adults managing both emotional and physical clutter. By creating a single, intentional space for rest, seniors can rewire stress responses and even lower blood pressure. But for Marina, it was simpler. She rediscovered what peace actually felt like. As weeks passed, her capsule became a sacred routine. Her tea mug wasn't just a vessel, it was part of a ritual. Her throw blanket wasn't fabric, it was grounding. Her journal wasn't a record, it was release. The beauty of it was its simplicity. She no longer sought comfort in more, but in enough. Her friends started to notice the calm in her voice. One even created her own capsule, a window seat with her late husband's sweater draped over the cushion. Soon, others followed. It became a quiet movement in their community, a rebellion against the noise of shoulds and somedays. Marina realized the comfort capsule wasn't about furniture at all. It was about focus, a gentle act of reclaiming space for emotional breathing. And perhaps that's the heart of decluttering at any age, not just making room in your home, but making room in your heart. What about you? If you could gather your peace into one small space, what would it hold? Maybe it's not the number of things that brings comfort, but the way you choose them: one chair, one light, one moment at a time. Cozy Home Makeover 4, The Giving Legacy Cabinet. Marina used to think she was protecting her family by holding on to everything. The antique brooch from her grandmother, the hand-painted vase from Italy, her husband's coin collection, the lace tablecloth used only on Easter mornings. Each piece held a story, and each story felt sacred. So, she tucked them away in drawers, boxes, and closets labeled for someday. But as the years passed, someday never came. The boxes remained closed, and the weight of her love, stored rather than shared, began to feel heavy. Then, one afternoon, after watching her granddaughter's face light up while trying on an old scarf, Marina felt something shift. The scarf had been sitting in a cedar chest for decades, unseen. Yet in that small moment, passed from wrinkled hands to young shoulders, it came alive again. It wasn't just a scarf anymore. It was laughter, memory, and continuity. That's when she decided to create what she called her Giving Legacy Cabinet. It wasn't about estate planning or inheritance. It was about living generosity, passing on memories while she was still here to see them cherished. She cleared one small cabinet in her hallway and placed a handwritten label on it, Legacy in Progress. Inside, she began placing sentimental items she was ready to gift, one at a time. Each object came with a short letter, a story about where it came from, why it mattered, and what lesson or emotion it carried. Her first treasure drop, as her grandchildren came to call them, was her husband's pocket watch, the one he wore every Sunday. She gave it to her grandson with a note that read, "He used to say time was a kindness. I hope you spend yours kindly." The reaction was priceless. Her grandson didn't just thank her, he started wearing it every weekend, telling his friends, "This was Grandpa's." The story continued, alive and moving. Each month, she'd choose one new item. A teacup, a photo frame, a pressed flower, a journal. Sometimes she mailed them with notes, sometimes she gave them during family dinners, wrapped in simple paper. With every gift, the atmosphere in her home shifted. It grew lighter, yet richer. Her family began to visit not out of duty but out of curiosity. What's Grandma giving this month? Researchers now say that acts of intentional giving, especially among older adults, can reduce depression, enhance purpose, and even extend lifespan. But Marina didn't need studies to tell her that. She could feel it every time she watched a grandchild's eyes light up with connection. She was no longer the guardian of memories. She was their storyteller in motion. Her cabinet became a celebration of continuity. It wasn't clutter anymore, it was legacy, curated with care and joy. Friends in her retirement community followed her lead, creating their own cabinets labeled Passing Joy Forward or Love in Motion. What started as decluttering became a movement of remembrance and release, a way to honor the past while living fully in the present. For Marina, the Giving Legacy Cabinet became her favorite project, a living archive that grew smaller and warmer with each month. Every empty shelf was not loss, but evidence of love that had been passed on, hand to hand, heart to heart. Because sometimes, the greatest gift isn't what you leave behind, it's what you choose to give while you're still here to see it spark joy. Cozy Home Makeover 5, The Sensory Calm Zone. It wasn't the clutter that wore Marina down, it was the noise that came with it. The buzzing thoughts, the mental lists, the faint hum of the refrigerator at midnight that somehow made the silence heavier. Her home looked calmer than before, but her mind still felt busy. It wasn't until she read an article in the American Journal of Geriatric Wellness about the science of sensory therapy that something clicked. The piece explained how seniors who engage multiple senses, gently and intentionally, can reduce anxiety by up to 40%. The concept was simple: balance your senses, and your thoughts follow. Marina realized that while she had decluttered her shelves, she hadn't yet decluttered her senses. Her environment was still overstimulating in some ways: harsh lighting, sharp echoes, synthetic scents, and undernourished in others. So, she began to design what she called her sensory calm zone. It wouldn't be another project or decorative nook, it would be her sanctuary of grounded stillness. She started small. The first edition was sound. Not music, not noise, but flow. She bought a tabletop fountain, a quiet trickle that filled the room with the kind of sound that reminded her of hiking trails after rain. The water wasn't loud, it was rhythmic, steady, alive. She'd sit near it and feel her breathing unconsciously match its pace. Next came scent. Instead of artificial air fresheners, she used a drop of lavender oil on a warm stone. The scent didn't overwhelm, it whispered. The room took on a kind of gentle rhythm, sound and scent weaving together like breath and heartbeat. Then came light. For years, Marina had relied on bright overhead bulbs that cast hard shadows on her walls. She replaced them with soft amber lamps, the kind that dim and glow like candlelight. The transformation was immediate. Her evenings no longer felt lonely, they felt soothing. The light softened everything: her thoughts, her mood, even the way she spoke to herself. Within a week, she noticed changes she hadn't expected. Her restless nights began to ease. Her appetite steadied. Even her posture relaxed, shoulders dropping, breath deepening. The tension she used to carry without noticing seemed to dissolve with each session in her calm zone. She would simply sit, close her eyes, and let her senses do what they were designed to do, bring her back to the present. Researchers now call this sensory coherence, and it's gaining popularity among older adults who struggle with stress or sleep disruption. It's not about spa candles or luxury decor, it's about giving your nervous system what it's quietly craving: gentle, predictable stimuli that signal safety. Marina's sensory calm zone became a kind of emotional anchor. She visited it every evening after dinner. No screens, no to-do lists, just stillness. She would run her fingers along the smooth rim of her tea mug, listen to the soft water, and let the lavender remind her to slow down. It was her way of saying, "I'm still here, and peace is still possible." Her friends began to notice her serenity. When they visited, they'd step into the room and instinctively lower their voices. "It feels like a retreat in here," one said softly. Marina smiled. That was the point. Her calm wasn't accidental anymore, it was cultivated. As she often said later, decluttering didn't end with the shelves. It ended when my home finally started to sound, smell, and feel like peace. Because sometimes, the mind doesn't quiet by thinking less, it quiets when your senses are finally in harmony. Cozy Home Makeover 6, The Connection Corner. Marina had perfected quiet. Her home now hummed with peace, soft lights, flowing water, and a scent of lavender that felt like an embrace. Yet one sound was missing, another voice. Evenings stretched longer than they used to. Meals that once felt comforting had begun to feel hollow. She realized that her home was calm, yes, but also silent. And silence, she discovered, can feel heavy when it lasts too long. One morning, while dusting her small kitchen table, she paused. The second chair, the one across from her, had become more symbolic than functional. She hadn't pulled it out in months. That chair represented something she didn't want to admit: disconnection. She missed the laughter that used to fill her evenings when friends dropped by unannounced. She missed stories told between sips of tea. That day, she decided to reclaim that empty seat. Marina moved the table closer to the window, where the sunlight could catch the rim of her teacups. She placed two chairs facing each other, equal, intentional, inviting. In the center, she set a small tray with two mugs, a pot of chamomile tea, and a handwritten note card that read, "Connection Corner." It wasn't decoration. It was a promise. She made a vow to herself: I will not eat alone anymore. Once a week, she would invite someone, anyone, to join her at that table. A neighbor who had just lost her husband. A church friend recovering from surgery. Even the mail carrier who once mentioned loving her lemon cookies. The first time she extended the invitation, she felt awkward, almost self-conscious. But when her guest arrived, a quiet widow named Elara, the awkwardness melted into warmth. They spoke about gardening, grief, and how strange it feels when the world grows quieter around you. By the time the tea turned cold, they were laughing like old friends. The ritual grew. Each week, a new person sat across from her, and each left behind something intangible: laughter, stories, shared understanding. The air in that little corner changed. It began to hold memory. Soon, her connection corner became a gentle tradition in the neighborhood. People didn't just come for tea, they came to be seen. Experts now call this kind of intentional space-making compassion decluttering. It's a practice where you don't just clear out physical clutter, you make emotional room for others. For seniors, it's especially transformative. Studies from the National Institute on Aging show that consistent social connection reduces loneliness-related stress and improves cardiovascular health. But beyond the science, there's something deeply human in it. Companionship feels like medicine. Marina often reflected on how simple it was. She didn't redesign her living room or buy new furniture. She just redefined what that small space meant. It stopped being a table and became a bridge. A place where connection wasn't accidental, it was chosen. Neighbors began to ask how she managed to stay so cheerful even through long winters. She'd smile and gesture toward her little table by the window. Because every week, she'd say, someone sits there and reminds me I'm not alone. Her connection corner became her emotional hearth, a place where tea turned into therapy and stories replaced silence. It was proof that sometimes, the most powerful home makeover isn't about color schemes or lighting. It's about designing for the soul, creating a space that invites warmth back in. And as Marina often whispered before each visit, gently placing her second cup on the tray, no one should ever have to sip tea in silence. Cozy Home Makeover 7, the digital declutter sanctuary. Marina thought her home was finally calm, soft lights, clear shelves, warm company. But one evening, as she sat by her window with her favorite tea, she noticed something strange. Though her surroundings were peaceful, her mind still buzzed. Notifications blinked on her phone, headlines scrolled across her tablet, and her inbox whispered constantly for attention. It was like her peace had been surrounded by invisible noise. So, she decided to take on one last transformation, not in her home, but in her digital world. She called it her digital declutter sanctuary. She began by facing the chaos she couldn't see. Her email inbox had over 14,000 unread messages, newsletters she never read, updates she didn't need, and reminders of things that no longer mattered. Each one carried a tiny weight, an invisible demand. So she started small, 20 minutes a day. She unsubscribed from mailing lists that no longer served her and deleted entire folders she'd forgotten existed. With every delete, she felt lighter, as if she were unpacking drawers inside her mind. Next came her photos. Thousands of images filled her phone, duplicates, screenshots, and endless travel snapshots from years past. As she scrolled, she realized she couldn't even remember where some were taken. It hit her, she wasn't preserving memories anymore, she was drowning in them. So, she began sorting, one moment at a time. She kept only the photos that made her feel something real. The ones that told a story she wanted to remember. Everything else, she let go. Her evenings started to feel calmer. But there was one more habit to change, the constant pull of notifications. Every ping, buzz, and flash had trained her to stay alert, even when she wanted rest. So she did something radical for her age group. She set her phone to do not disturb for 2 hours every afternoon. The first day, it felt strange, like she was missing something urgent. But by the third day, she noticed something powerful. Her thoughts began to stretch again, like muscles long unused. She found herself daydreaming, journaling, even humming softly without distraction. Marina discovered what many experts are now calling digital quiet. It's not about rejecting technology, it's about reclaiming agency. Studies from cognitive aging researchers confirm that digital overstimulation can fragment memory and increase anxiety among older adults. But when seniors introduce intentional digital breaks, even short ones, their focus, sleep, and overall emotional resilience improve dramatically. For Marina, these moments of quiet became sacred. She'd sit in her favorite chair during her tech-off hours, a gentle lamp beside her, soft instrumental music playing. She called it her sanctuary hour. During this time, she didn't scroll or swipe, she simply was. She let her thoughts wander, wrote postcards to her grandchildren, sometimes even read aloud from her old journals. What she found wasn't boredom, it was peace, deep and uninterrupted. Soon, her friends began to notice the change. "You seem more present," one said during a visit. Marina smiled knowingly. "I finally stopped living inside the noise," she replied. The beauty of her digital declutter sanctuary wasn't in what she removed, but in what she regained: attention, clarity, and quiet joy. Her mind began to mirror her home, uncluttered, intentional, warm. Every senior who visits her now leaves with one challenge: to try their own tour digital quiet. Not as punishment, but as permission. Permission to listen to silence, to rediscover stillness, and to let the world slow down just long enough for peace to find them again. 6 weeks later, Marina's home doesn't just look different, it feels alive again. The air moves differently now, lighter, calmer, carrying the scent of lavender and old paper. There's laughter again in the evenings, soft light on her bookshelves, and a rhythm of living that feels deliberate, peaceful, earned. The clutter didn't vanish overnight, it transformed. Each drawer, shelf, and corner now carries choice, not chaos. What once felt like too much now feels like enough. Her journey was never about becoming minimalist, it was about becoming mindful. She didn't strip her home of meaning, she stripped away the noise that buried it. Through each cozy makeover, she learned that comfort isn't about accumulation, it's about attention. Every object she kept now has a voice, a reason to belong. And every space she cleared invited something new in: light, connection, breath. Mariner calls it making room for living. It's a quiet revolution spreading among older Americans, seniors choosing warmth over waste, purpose over perfection. Before you go, tap that hype button, hit like, and subscribe to Wise Aging Seniors. You get 3 free hypes every week, and each one helps this message reach more seniors ready to renew their space, their peace, and maybe even their story.